Dear chess friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm very excited to share with you one of my most memorable moments in my chess career. Draw against Garry Kasparov in the game which was played in 2000 in Israel. Now, before we move to this game, I would like also to mention that it was not my first games against Garry. In 1992, when I was 14 years old, I was fortunate to meet Garry off the board in two Blitz games. It happened in Moscow, House of Journalists. That was a special pre-Olympic Blitz, where besides Garry, I also faced Mikhail Tal and Vasily Smyslov and all Russian national team. Now, we played two games. I drew one, actually having a winning position at the end. And the second game, he was able to beat me, so it was 1.5 to have. Like, I lost this mini match. And by the way, the second game also was very fighting game. We played until like the last seconds, so he was able to beat me eventually. Now, back to the game that was played in 2000. The tournament was Israeli League. Now, it's a very popular, very traditional competition in Israel, where like basically every year we have a top division, first league, second league, so like ABC and so on. And since my first day in Israel, I was already assigned to the team, and all the years that I spent in Israel, 20 years in Israel, I played for one of the teams. So in the beginning it was the chess club from Beersheba, and then it was another club in Ashdod. It's actually like two major chess clubs in Israel. So this time it was the match between Beersheba, the team which has won a lot of championship. Actually, like we came, I think, third twice in European Club Championship, and the team that Garry Kasparov was playing for, it was Rishon LeZion, and they had a very special sponsor back then in 2000. So besides Garry Kasparov, there was also Viktor Korchnoi play, Judith Polgar, and some other strong players. This match actually, our team lost by 1 point, but we were able to catch up in the last round and eventually win the championship. Now, the game was played in May 2000. So probably some of you know that if you know the history of chess, this year Kasparov actually lost his title to Vladimir Kramnik in his match, which was played in London. I think it was November, if I'm not mistaken. But he was, I think, like during our game, he had actually his peak rating, 2851. If you check the highest rated, the peak rating of Garry Kasparov, 2851. So during our game, he was at his peak rating. Now, it's remarkable, was very unusual also when our team arrived. So the game has been played actually in Tel-Aviv, and there was a very special place where it's called Solon City Chess Center in the Tel-Aviv, where quite often we played centralized rounds. That means all 10 or 12 teams were playing at the same place, at the same building. This building was it was a very nice building. If I remember correctly, Garry Kasparov himself donated some amount, if I'm not mistaken, 30,000 to build this building. There was a building where Chess Federation was actually sitting, Israeli Chess Federation, and they also ran a lot of chess events, obviously. Now, it was very interesting. When I arrived, there was a feeling that it's actually not a chess event, but it's rather a soccer game. I have never seen so many spectators at chess games. Usually when we play league matches, there are just some people who love chess, some people who just like came to watch some strong players, Grandmaster, but it's usually maybe 10, 20 spectators. So here, it was very hard to get to the board, actually, and we were late, maybe 2 minutes, so it was very hard to get to the board. And there was actually a second floor also fully seated by spectators. And now let's go to the game. So as I mentioned, I was able to draw this game. I was playing white. that's one of the reasons. I believe this is one of the major reasons that I was able to get this positive result, because with white you have the advantage of the false move, and I was always considered to be like a good theoretician. So it's one of the very important moments, guys, that you understand. When you know openings very well, it allows you to compete equal against stronger opponents, high-rated guys. So that was one of the reasons, because back then I cannot imagine surviving with black pieces. Kasparov had a terrific percentage of winning with white pieces. Usually if he is going to some super tournaments, like, he was almost crushing everyone with white pieces. Now, it's definitely helped a lot. Now, the game started with, I started the game with d4, my favorite move. Garry opted for runfled. It was a very interesting choice. He is also, as many of you know, it's runfled opening that he actually specialized. If you remember Kasparov-Karpov matches, he played a lot of runfled in these matches. Now, but back then, I don't think it was his major opening. I think he was more like focused on Slav defense or Queen's Gambit decline. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a surprise for me, because, well, his name is just associated with the runfled opening. But I think he also understood well that this is also the opening that I played with black, and so I knew it's pretty well. Here in this game, I decided to opt for this line: cd5, knight d5, e4, knight takes c3. As you know, this is like one of the main positions, and play the variation which starts with knight f3, c5, and rook b1. To be honest, I don't know the name of this variation. What is the official name? I'm not sure even there is a name. Maybe it's just called knight f3, rook b1, but for me, it's always was like the variation of Gelfand. I learned this line according to Gelfand games. He had a bunch of beautiful victories in this variation, and obviously I knew this line for both colors. I also faced this a lot with black. Back then it was quite popular. I think like nowadays it's not like that popular, not top 5 choices for white, but it's still a nice line. It leads to a very complicated game. So castle should be played and bishop e2. So here, not surprisingly, Garry opted for the move b6. I just wanted to mention very quickly the theory. I think from one side he knew that the main lines, there is a lot of potential for some like equalizing lines, maybe simplifying lines for white and so on. And now there is a psychological moment here as well, that he wanted probably to keep as a secret some of the lines that he can play against Vladimir Kramnik in their match. Actually, he played, I think, maybe he actually only played one game in runfled, and he lost this game to Kramnik, and then he switched to Nimzo Indian and other openings. So it was, but definitely runfled was his major choice for the match, at least like in the beginning. Now, he played against me b6, he played here b6. Now, I would like to mention some other lines. There are two major lines nowadays. One line that I like to play for black, it's knight c6, d5. By the way, guys, this is the idea of rook b1. Now, when you play rook b1, then bishop c3 is not so dangerous, and it's actually after bishop c3, bishop d2, rook is not hanging on a1, and so there is a very well-known theoretical line, knight a5, h4, which leads to very dangerous initiative for white. Still a playable line, but it's quite dangerous. Now, knight e5 is the main move here, and knight e5, bishop e5, pawn on c3 is hanging, queen d2, very interesting move, but it's considered to be the main move. And now I had a great time playing this interesting system that my coach showed me in 1995. Back then it was a surprising weapon. I was scoring tremendously. Nowadays it's very well known black choice, one of the top choices played by many strong grandmasters, especially Maxime Vacher-Lagrave and so on. So that's a very well-known line nowadays. Now, so this is one idea. As I mentioned, he played b6, and of course I would like also to highlight probably the main line which played quite often on the high level. So it's definitely top choice. So here I plan to go for the pawn sacrifice, queen takes a2, castle. This is where the theory starts. It was also one of the recommendations in my Grunfeld book. There is a lot of theory, but usually white has a very serious compensation here. And like, for instance, the best line that considers nowadays bishop g4, there are actually a lot of lines where black is basically forced to repeat the moves, or it's like a forced draw or stuff like this. It's quite possible that already back then Kasparov knew about this, and he wanted to keep it for the match, and he wanted to play for win in this game. So he played b6. Also the line that after this game I started to play myself with black pieces. I played in this position castle and bishop b7. So in this game, so the pawn on e4 obviously hanging, and I played queen d3. Back then it's considered to be the main line. Now, instead of queen d3, nowadays there is a very interesting idea: d5, pawn sacrifice, bishop c3, and h4. So this is like how the theory evolved throughout times. Now we can see a lot of ideas, a lot of positions where suddenly h4, h5 is coming in Grunfeld. So that seems quite a dangerous position here for black. But it's relatively a modern line, so back then nobody knew about this continuation. And even if I would know, I'm not sure I would play against Garry Kasparov this pawn sacrifice. So I played queen d3, solid choice. He opted for bishop a6, attacking my queen. Now there is a major alternative here. Instead of bishop a6 to play e6, and then the theory goes just bishop g5, attacking the queen, queen c7, queen e3, knight d7. Very popular line with a lot of games here. I'm not exactly sure what's the current standings in the theory, but played by a lot of strong grandmasters. Especially I remember the games of Peter Sviller. So in this game, Garry played bishop a6, attacking my queen. Obviously, I have to move my queen, queen e3. And in general, the trade considered to be quite favorable for black in Grunfeld positions, because it allows to control, maybe to start fighting for c4 square. But now there is a very important move here, queen d7. Queen d7, actually what is happening with this pawn structure, with this typical Grunfeld pawn structure, I'm talking about these pawns for white. The a4 square, it's usually irrelevant, but there are some lines where black can get his queen to a4. It's actually quite interesting, and it cannot be chased off from a4 square by b3. So it's and from this square, it potentially will attack a2 and d4 pawns. So now in this position, there are many options. There are many options for white. I decided to go for bishop captures a6. I would like to mention that a couple of choices. Now, so one of the actually very recent games when Garry decided to came back from retirement. I mean, well, not exactly, but just to play some exhibition events in St. Louis. He played this line against Wesley So, and Wesley So just went h4. So it was interesting to see how this game developed. It was queen a4 here in this position, h5, so pawn sacrifice. But all this very time consuming, he captured this pawn, rook b2, queen a4. Now I think Wesley captured g6, but when I analyze this position, I feel like after d5, it's very, very dangerous for black. Pieces undeveloped, potentially, I think potentially queen can be transferred here, and I feel like it's a very promising position for white. Now, on the other hand, here I thought that maybe after move h4, black can try queen g4, take advantage of this move h4, so queen cannot be really chased off from the square. I mean, first of all, we are going to trade this bishop, of course, h4 is hanging, and so on. So this is one option. Now, another option that I would like to mention here in this position, instead of bishop a6, now dc5, of course, dc5. I actually faced this twice against very strong grandmaster Belavsky and Van Velde. Now it's very important to insert bishop e2. Actually, one of the first games that I saw in this variation was the game between Gelfand and Ivan Sokolov, where Ivan played bc5. this move actually loses on the spot to rook b8. So black losing material, 2 pieces for the rook. It's pretty bad. Now dc5 you have to take bishop e2, queen e2, and bc5. And this position is pretty good for black. Well, of course, queen c4 and queen c6. So there is this position. Black is doing pretty well in from what I know, and I don't think white tried too much to improve on this line, but rather switch to some other variation. So already later I had a very nice win in Olympiad against Pentala Hare, very strong Indian Grandmaster who is now over 2700, but back then during the 2004 Olympiad he was still 2600 Grandmaster. So I played d5, and in this position bishop e2, queen e2, bishop c3. So I basically sacrificed the pawn, and bishop h6. So what we get for the pawn, it's obviously strong center, better piece coordination, knight is still on b8, and black still needs to prepare to develop this. Now probably it seems like rook e8 might be a better move. No, well, actually this was played in the game, rook e8 was played in the game. Another option to go bishop g7, and here like probably the better choice, take and rook d1 and prepare in e5. So definitely with king on g7, without dark square bishop, there will be a lot of compensation, long-term compensation for white. Now Hare Krishna decided to play rook e8 here, and I found this nice idea, rook b3, like comes with the tempo, attacking the bishop, bishop h8. So obviously if you haven't played bishop g7, there is no point. The whole point was to save the bishop. And knight g5, preparing f4 and the attack. And of course another idea is potentially rook sleeved, e5, f4, f6, f takes e5. Well, it's not even, I wouldn't call it even sacrifice. Obviously after fg5 there is e6 or even rook f3, which is like probably crushing. He played rook e5, knight f3, rook e8. Now queen c4 is coming, so of course the king is vulnerable also. Well, still this knight is undeveloped, and bishop g7, capture, e5. It appears that pawn is untouchable. I think I can just simply play knight g5, and it's very hard to stop this crushing ideas. d6, knight f7, also rook f7 on the way. So Pentala Hare Krishna played knight e7, and then I got these massive pawns on the 6th rank, and it was an easy win from here. Now back, so we talked about d5. I think it's maybe the most challenging, the most interesting move, but back then with Garry I decided to go for bishop a6, knight captures a6, and queen e2, solid choice. And so Garry in this position played a new move, knight c7, which is much stronger actually than queen a4. Queen a4, yeah, I think like I was ready for this move, so I went for this line because I thought like if this is happening, d5, actually white gets some advantage. So there is, for instance, a crushing victory, like very quick victory between played in Russia between Eugene Nair and Uferov. So black decided to take bishop c3, and it's got even worse after this. Now rook b3 came, so not only the bishop is hanging, but there is a threat rook a3, winning the knight. So basically black is forced to play bishop b4, but then the king is basically has no defenders. The king side is exposed, queen side, I'm sorry. So the rook h3 is coming. This knight is heading potentially to c6. It's a disaster. So not surprisingly, the game ended in a few moves here. Rook h3, c4, queen e3, and just queen h6, and just there are no pieces to defend black king around, right? So black resigned in this game. Now knight c7, it's a good improvement, and probably the move that eventually leads to pretty solid position for black and potential equalizer. Knight c7. I played rook d8, very natural move. Rook a d8 was Garry response. Now what is interesting that I personally played this position later in 2002, and I decided to go for queen a4 just to surprise my opponent, because he definitely knew the game of Garry Kasparov. And actually it's very quickly I got advantage, but definitely white didn't play very well in this game. Bishop g5, targeting e7 pawn. Now rook e8, queen d2, too slow. Rook a8, bishop h6. Okay, white gets this bishop h6, but then it was even like e5, very nice move, and it's appeared after bishop g7, king g7. The center is under attack, and potentially black is winning material, because after d5 I can take the pawn on e4, right? So that this move is not possible for white, and so it's pretty bad. Now after rook d1, rook d8 was played by Garry. Rook d8, so just normal moves, normal development. Bishop e3, definitely I wanted to keep it solid, not to risk too much. Obviously draw would be dream result for me at this point. Now and almost like from the start I would be very happy, but of course I knew the fighting spirit of Garry, so he's definitely playing for a win. Queen a4, so basically black executing his major idea of queen d7 move. Now rook dc1. Rook dc1, a nice solid move, anticipating move cd4, opening up of c file, so I will be ready for that. cd4, cd4. Now, not surprising, black not Russian with this capture, but playing rook d7. Now I decided to play in this position queen c2, solid move queen c2. What about other moves? Definitely, maybe if other opponent, I would probably try something like h4. I seriously consider this move, like trying to create some play on the king side. Looks interesting. I think still black is doing fine here. Now another option, very important to mention, that dc5 actually doesn't win the pawn. There is this important idea. bc5 first, of course, after queen e4, there is cb6, so it's white will be pawn up, so black has to prove his compensation, or even I can maybe insert at some point knight d2 or knight g5 before capturing. Now, but bc5 is much easier, and then after bishop c5, there is this tempo knight e6. And there are no good squares, and for instance after bishop e3, no good squares for the bishop, queen e4. Only black can be better here. Just I think like c pawn eventually rather weakness than a pass pawn. Now I played queen c2. I played queen c2 in this position. It's hard to see how black can reject the queen straight. Then I start advancing in the pawn in the center with d5 and so on. So he captured queen c2, rook c2. Now pawn on c5 is definitely hanging, so cd4 now, cd4, cd4, thematic Grunfeld endgame with this pawn structure, d4, e4, very often happening from bishop e3 variation. Now in this position, Garry played very energetic f5. It's also one of the thematic ideas in these pawn structures. So not only you can attack pawn d4, but you can also undermine, you can also attack pawn e4. The idea, if white will play e5, then d5 square available for black knight. I didn't want to play this move. Actually, it's not as bad as it looks at first glance, because we also shutting down the dark square bishop, the Grunfeld bishop. Now I think it's approximately equal position. So there was I found the game which was played in 2009, and I think black played really well here, playing h6, covering g5. It's well-known idea, rook c6, and slowly activating bishop through f8 square. So that was the plan, to play rook f7, bishop d2, first g5, like I guess gaining space a little bit, and after bishop b4, bishop f8. So it was about equal in this game. So this plan, it's a lot of commitments e5, and in long run it can be worse for white. I mean, I didn't like this move. Now rook bc1 is much better choice. Rook bc1 comes with the tempo, attacking knight on c7. Now in this position, Garry actually committed first inaccuracy. He played knight b5. Now much better was move knight e6, and then after d5, knight c5. I'm pretty sure that Garry saw this line, but he perfectly knew that it's a very drawish line. So let's say I just take ef5, rook f5, capture on c5, bc5, rook c5, rook d5, and it's just very equalish position here. It's like even I would say there is maybe symbolic advantage for white because of like problematic e7 pawn. So he wanted to complicate the game, and so basically that was the opportunity that I was waiting for. He missed one very important detail, e5. Now e5, now that's a different story because knight is not getting on d5, and it's kind of like strangely placed here. Now, of course, it's very important that black expected to play in this position f4. So that was the idea. Now, a4. Of course, moving the bishop, it's not really an option because then black captures on d4, just winning the pawn. So it would be a serious mistake. a4. So that's why I played e5, because I saw this a4 intermediate move. Now, he has to take on e3, obviously. ab5. ab5 here, and bishop h6. If I remember correctly, he definitely saw this line, and he hoped that this position there is a very interesting counterplay. Bishop gets into the game, but it's not enough for something serious for black. So actually, so you can see that there is a threat right now. Obviously, for the same reason, I cannot take on e3 because of the check bishop e3, and I'm losing exchange. But a very natural move in this position, rook a1, just getting away from x-ray, and a file is great. So there is a7 pawn is under attack. Now here comes like already a very serious mistake. We're talking about knight b5. It's probably some kind of inaccuracy, because with super precise play, black could still hold objective equality here. How to do this? It's like ef2. I have to take with the king, of course. Rook f2 loses to bishop e3. It's terrible. So king f2, and now rook takes d4. So this is the line that definitely we both saw. Rook takes a7, and now he, well, it's not easy to see, but he thought about this move bishop g5, but here it's a little bit dangerous. I can play rook b7, basically attacking pawn on b6, so I'm actually winning the pawn. Rook e4 with idea bishop e3 check, and just in time rook e2 covering e3 square, and seems like I'm just getting this pawn, right? So that was the reason why he rejected. In fact, there was, instead of playing bishop g5, there was move rook d5, which looks extremely dangerous, because I take here rook b7, and after rook b5, rook c7 comes, and I mean, there is no way black can hold this position with both rooks on 7th rank. It's already h7 pawn is falling, so on. Obviously, king is very exposed. But here there is an amazing move, bishop g5, tempo, and actually the point is that after rook b7, black goes after e5 pawn. So there is a pin, so e5 pawn can be captured. Now, obviously, bishop e3 is still in there. That's why I cannot take rook b6. But rook c7 still looks very dangerous. The difference here, without e5 pawn, black can calmly play bishop f6. And after rook h7, by the way, a nice trick here, rook b6. Why not to take the pawn? That's why losing exchange and I guess the game as well. Now, after rook h7, rook b5, it actually appears that bishop on f6 is very strong, and keeps the position of black king quite well protected. It's objectively equal, should be draw. Now, instead of this idea, black played. So we got to this position. Instead of playing ef2, Garry played immediate rook d5. Now I took on a7, and he just captured this pawn, rook b5. So this looks like, okay, there is a threat, rook b1, and I think that was approximately that he was hoping for. So there is a counterplay. I cannot really play like h3, g3. So, but there is a very comfortable move, king f1. So solving the problem of rook b1 check, king comes here. Also, I shouldn't worry about any ef2 potential x-rays and so on. So very nice, was very happy to find this move. Now Garry is defended very well in this position. Now if ef2 after king f2, let's say rook e8 now, so I can take my king, let's say to g3 from the danger zone, it's clear advantage. I mean, even though this bishop is not on g7, but this diagonal is not really working very well. And I also have a very good central pawns. Now rook e8 is much better move. There is no reason for black to rush with ef2. I played fe3 in this position, bishop e3, king e2. King e2, we know in the endgames, king is very important piece, so my king is moving towards the center. Now bishop f4. Bishop f4, now, well, wouldn't change much, rook b3, I can go, let's say, rook c7, preparing rook c3, one idea, a potential rook c8 as well, and probably ready even for d5, so that's quite a significant advantage. Bishop f4. Bishop f4, this is the critical moment in the game where I was, I guess, not brave enough to play for a win. I decided to go for a very safe idea, rook a2, trade with idea rook b2 to trade rooks, underestimating potential. Yeah, I knew I'm better here in this position. Now, the right idea was to play rook c7 in this position. Rook c7, targeting the pawn. Now, of course, if black plays rook b2, I will go king d3, rook g2, and after rook e7, let's say rook e7, rook e7, definitely this trade, pawn straight, is very, very favorable for white. These two central pawns should decide the game. Now, definitely defending the pawn, king f8 is a better choice, and then after king d3, it's very clear positional advantage for white. Very clear positional advantage for white, so the idea to go king e4, and then maybe potential d5, start advancing, d6 can come, clear positional advantage in this position. Now, that was the better solution. I opted for rook a2. I thought it's kind of like safe idea, so that I can play, just exchanging the rooks, like king f7. And now, but king f7, I didn't, well, I picked up the wrong rook here, playing rook b2, so I played with rook c. Instead, should have played with rook a b2. Rook a b2, what is the reason? I'm looking for this position, so in this case, it's a very nice, it's a very pleasant advantage. All the same ideas that I mentioned before, king comes, d5, start advancing, still the bishop is problematic somehow. Now, I was probably concerned about this move. So there is this tactical solution, so it's nice tactical resource, so like rook b5, rook c2, and then just king d3 is a good move, king d3, rook c2, rook c2, and once again, it's a nice positional advantage. It would be extremely hard for me to convert this position, obviously, but at least it was worth trying. It was worth trying because white is very safe here. Now, instead, I went with rook c, and he actually, in this case, he had a better opportunity to play rook a5 here. So it's a much better trick. So as we know, rook takes b2, rook b2, it's what I want, it's clear advantage. But there is rook a5 here in this position. By the way, there is also rook a8, so it's also works better. But rook a5, capture on a5, ba5. Now the pawn is becomes a little bit dangerous, so it's a good idea to stop this pawn. Rook a2, rook a8, and rook a4. Actually, when I played rook a b2, I saw this line, and what I thought, like, whatever happens, I get d5 with tempo, attacking the bishop, and I will have advantage here. Now, Garry found this king e6. This is the only move which maintains the balance. Now, the whole point is that in case of king d3, king comes to d5, and it basically stops my ideas. The plan was king e4 followed by d5. Now, after d5 that I played in the game, there is king f5. There is king f5, protecting the bishop, so I cannot win any material. I knew that my advantage disappeared here, and I think it was a very good decision, very good practical choice, so I just opted for move repetition. I went knight h4. Obviously, it would be suicidal to go to g4 with my rook on f4, just g3 wins the piece. So Garry captured my central pawn, but then knight f3, and black has to repeat the position. So here, draw was agreed because of the repetition. Well, back then it felt like amazing achievement. I was extremely happy, delighted about my result. As I mentioned before, the team is lost by 1 point. It was like pretty good result because the opposite team had a lot of superstars besides Garry. Now what was interesting after the game, Garry was very kind to me. He offered to analyze the game. So we went to some special room where we were alone. He basically not allowing other spectators because it would be crazy. Like once the game finished, everyone wanted basically to have Kasparov's signature. Now we had this separate room, and there was Grandmaster Dohoyan, his coach back then, and another Grandmaster, Israeli Grandmaster Boris Alterman. So we were actually 4 together. We analyzed the games. We analyzed this game. He saw so many lines here. He was showing me so many variations. What was very interesting that I mentioned to my students, sometimes I'm mentioning, you know, when you see this game, you don't really feel the difference between the players. Even like I would say, like White had some initiative, but and mostly it was there were not so many lines. I was rather relying on my intuition and positional understanding. Meanwhile, he saw some lines like 10 moves ahead, which I had no clue that they exist, and it was fun. It was fun to see his analysis, his quick lines. You know, to be honest, even sometimes I couldn't like even visualize what he's analyzing. He was like telling me, "Oh well, this line I calculated it like this," and it was very hard. So it's like calculation machine, and he always was like that. Now, again, amazing result. Was very excited, and the funny thing, what happened after this game, that for probably 2-3 weeks I became a celebrity in Israel. I was interviewed by radio channels, TV channels, newspapers. It was the reason for that, once again, that I would like to mention, that back then chess was not very popular. Nowadays a lot has changed. Obviously, with the Boris Gelfand playing World Championship match, now people recognize chess. They're aware of chess players. It's very popular. Many schools have chess curriculum and so on. But back then, everyone knew only about Garry Kasparov. It was a superstar, celebrity. Nobody knew about like even local grandmasters. And of course, everyone knew about Kasparov playing against Deep Blue, against computer, and so on. So it was very confusing for all these newspapers and media that there is a local kid who actually drew against world champion, the best player. So one of the questions was, well, if you drew, so you probably on the way to become the next next world champion. So it was interesting. Of course, getting a draw with White, it's like, for someone who knows the theory very well, it's well, it's kind of like normal result against stronger player. Of course, Kasparov, it's a special place. You know, it's still not easy against him with all his, like, you know, challenging play and killer instinct, but it was fun time. It was fun time. I was, you know, the main newspaper in Israel published the article about this. Like mainstream channels mentioned this. It's a great memories. It's a great memories. Like something which is equal to maybe my like great results in the tournaments. It was really something special. I'm glad that I was able to share with you guys this story, and I'll hope to see you once again on my channel for the future videos. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like this video, click notification button, and of course leave some comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.